Hey guys, this is Isaac from Contender Bicycles, and with me here today is the all-new 2025 Cervélo Áspero 5. It's been 4 years since Cervélo originally launched the Aspero 5, and this new bike has come in swinging with lots and lots of changes. The original Aspero 5 was a gravel race bike that had 42C tire clearance, was very stiff and race focused. This new bike goes further down that path, and it's even more race focused than its predecessor, hammering in new aero, a little bit more tire clearance, and some other changes as well. We've had some time on this bike and some hours and miles. In addition to the bike, we also have some time on the new SRAM Force drivetrain that was on this bike as well, which we will touch on a little bit later. Stick around to find out more. If you followed Cervélo bikes for a while or you're familiar with their lineup, you might have seen the S5, which is their aero road race bike. This has been raced at many a world tour, and it has proved its credentials by winning many races, including most recently the Giro. The Cervélo took what they knew from the S5 as their aero race bike and transferred that into knowledge for the Aspero to make the Aspero as race-like as they can. You can see it looks very, very similar to the S5 in the rear end. This bike is super aerodynamically focused, which was the biggest change over the previous Aspero, was to see how fast they can make this aero-wise. Marianne Vos is the current gravel world champion, and she has already raced this bike a couple weeks before its launch and won on it in her rainbow stripes since then. So this bike has already got the credentials to back up its speed. Over the outgoing Aspero 5 from 4 years ago, this updated modern frame, Cervélo's claims, is 37 watts faster than the previous one. And also they claim that it's 34 watts faster than anything they tested from their nearest competitors. As far as other aerodynamics on the frame, some of this comes down to tires. Cervélo has this bike come stock on some Vittoria Corsa Control Pros 42 front and rear, which is the base setup, but they also said if you actually move to a 44C tire in the rear with a 40C tire on the front, that's actually the fastest possible situation for this bike, and it makes the bike even more aerodynamically fast. The 44 in the rear with the 40 on the front does also change the geometry slightly, and they also claim that that is only should be used for courses that allow it because it's not quite as stable as the 42-42 setup from Vittoria. Other additional changes over the old outgoing Aspero 5 besides just aero are some things along the lines of reliability. They have a T47 threaded bottom bracket in here instead of the outgoing BB Right, which was a press fit bottom bracket. It retains the same asymmetrical design as BB Right, so it's outboard on drive side and inboard on the non-drive side, but it is now threaded instead of press fit. And it also now includes a universal derailleur hanger, so you can use any derailleur hanger you can find anywhere, but it also means it's compatible with all transmission direct mount systems from SRAM, like Red 13 Speed or any of their mountain bike mullet setups. In addition to that, they also have included frame storage, which has already been tried and true on their Caledonia and their most recent frames, and also their Triathlon P series. It's the same frame storage system as that as well. So any things like repair kit, tubes, all that can go inside the frame and out of the wind. Now on this bike, usually the downside of more aerodynamics is going to be weight. Cervélo added a lot of more depth to the frame in places like the head tube, bottom bracket, and seat tube to add aerodynamics, but they managed to do the impossible, and this bike actually has 60 grams lighter taken out of the carbon versus the previous Aspero 5. So not only is it more aerodynamic, it's also slightly lighter as well. As far as geometry goes, it's actually pretty similar to the outgoing Aspero 5 geometry, which has already been tried and true, and is very, very similar. As far as gravel geometry is concerned, it's very aggressive, showing its true race nature. Compared to most other gravel bikes in the same size, I rode a 56, I am 6'1", and most other gravel bikes in that 56/large range, this bike is much lower on the front end. Our test bike here has a 575 millimeter stack height, which is very low for a 56. It is much more the stack height of a road bike, not necessarily a gravel bike, but it is a race bike, so we like to see it. The other thing with this one is going to be reach. Reach is actually almost identical to the outgoing model and doesn't really change that much. While a lot of other gravel bikes have gone longer, this bike has stayed relatively the same for more quick handling. When it comes to geometry, it also changes actually when you change the tire setup. Cervélo actually has two geometry charts you can see on their website. because the geometry is different when you run their more aerodynamic tire setup as we mentioned earlier. When you run that more aerodynamic tire setup that we mentioned earlier with the 44 in the rear and the 40 on the front, geometry on this bike actually gets a little bit lower in the stack height area and even gets slightly longer. So that is technically also better geometry-wise for speed. So it's not just the aerodynamic change from the tires, but it does change the geometry of the bike overall. The head angle did slacken out slightly on this bike by about half a degree in any given size, as the head angle is size specific. So it is a little bit more capable in descents than the previous outgoing Aspero 5. Moving on to actually riding this bike was super fun to ride and get some miles on. As far as climbing is concerned, this bike does what a lot of gravel bikes don't, and it feels very responsive while climbing. Sometimes gravel bikes, which have a more comfortable carbon layup on them, can tend to start to feel sluggish climbing, especially if you've been used to riding a road bike that is a much lighter, more nimble climber. And this Cervélo Áspero does not do that. The Aspero is a very maneuverable climber. It climbs very well, super stiff in the rear end, feels responsive, and it doesn't feel like you're losing any power. In addition to that, it also gear range wise comes with the transmission mullet setup stock on this build, which is a pretty low gear range, which meant I could spin my way up, which is technically more efficient on some pretty steep stuff, which was awesome. Climbing on this bike was very easy, very natural, though I did have some slight issues on rougher gravel climbs. This bike comes stock with the Vittoria Corsa Pro control in the 42C, which doesn't have any side knobs on it and not a ton of traction. I found that on very loose, steep gravel climbs, my rear wheel was spinning, but this could be fixed pretty easily by switching to a tire that's just got a little bit more traction in the rear. When it comes to descending on this bike, it was very, very stable and very fast, which I would hope so considering how aero this bike is. Descending on this bike in a straight line lets you fly. Some gravel bikes kind of take some effort to get above a certain speed because as the faster you go, aerodynamic drag increases, and gravel bikes aren't necessarily the most aerodynamic thing ever. This bike had no struggle getting over 40 to 45 miles per hour pretty easily, and it also feels extremely stable while doing it. At really, really high speeds, there was no wobble, no sense of sketchiness. It felt extremely stable and never had a problem. Going into corners, like fast corners on tarmac on the road, it did feel like it needed some a little bit more maneuvering and a little bit more input to the bike to get it to corner well. Some road bikes can feel like they corner pretty fast and very intuitively. If you've ridden an aero road bike before, you might know this feeling where it feels like you're kind of listing when you're cornering instead of just cornering with the road bike. This feels more like that. I'm assuming some of that's because number one, it is a gravel bike, not a road bike. And also due to some of the aerodynamic styling of the bikes meant it handles a little bit slower in corners. I never really had an issue, it just required a little bit more effort on fast tarmac corners. When it comes to descending on dirt, this bike does have a lower stack height than some other gravel bikes, which honestly, I'm kind of a fan on the dirt. On gravel bikes, it tends to feel like you're a little bit too high up descending, in my personal opinion. It feels like you can't push them super hard because it feels like the front wheel wants to wash out on you. This bike has a lower stack height, so that was never an issue, and stability was never an issue because of that as well. Cornering on dirt, I did feel like I had to scrub a lot of speed off with the brakes before going into a corner because it didn't feel like it could take it with traction. I think, again, that's due to tire setup. I think some knobbier tires would let me not scrub any speed before corners and take corners like I would be able to on my normal gravel bike, which does have some side knob to them. As far as fast gravel is concerned and overall just riding, not descending or climbing, that is really where this bike starts to shine. Things like farm roads on fast flowy gravel, you can really settle to a rhythm on this bike that's kind of crazy. This bike is super fast in a straight line and you can kind of just tuck, pedal, and go. And it is really awesome to see how fast it can truly go, especially when riding other gravel bikes. You do notice the aerodynamic difference and how much speed it can carry. I would say on really rough gravel roads, it was a pretty stiff frame to the point where it felt like you were getting bounced around a lot. I didn't necessarily think this was an issue with comfort-wise, but I didn't feel comfortable enough to be able to take my hands off the bars for things like eating and drinking while on rougher stuff, but as soon as you got to a smooth section, it was just fine. Again, just like coming and descending on rougher gravel roads, I think a lot of this is due to tire choice. I think American gravel is just slightly rougher than what this bike was designed for, which was Marianne Vos to win more gravel world championships in Europe, which are a little bit smoother. I think fast flowing farm roads, this bike is the ultimate speed machine. I don't really think anything else is going to be faster due to how aerodynamic this frame is. As far as part specifications are concerned on all the kits that come from Cervélo, they're pretty awesome. I was really stoked to look at some of the part spec sheets directly from the factory. These bikes do come with a very big aero chainring. This one's on a 48-tooth aero chainring, stock from the factory, which is awesome. Some actual race gearing, not a chainring that's too small. And kind of going along with the race theme, that goes for a lot of the other parts on this bike. This bike has a new Cervélo HB16 carbon fiber handlebar on it, which is an aero flat top, which is also flared for gravel. And I thought this bar was super comfortable. I was a pretty big fan of the new HB16. And on our size 56, it came stock with a 40-centimeter width, which is pretty narrow for a 56. Most 56s I have bought road bike and gravel bike wise in the industry either come with 42 or even sometimes 44-centimeter handlebars, so going narrow was awesome. I'd even like Cervélo to put a 38, but hey, some people might argue with me there. When it comes to things like narrow handlebars and other fit specifications, they even put shorter cranks and a 0 mm offset seat post on our size large here. This bike came with a 170mm crankset, and I remember a time where I couldn't buy a bike in my size in the industry without cranks that were 175. All of these things are showing that Cervélo is listening to what racers truly want on their bikes, and they spec it from the factory, which I think is super cool. This bike also came stock with a ceramic bottom bracket, and it comes stock with ceramic bottom bracket across all builds. Doesn't matter if you get the top end one or the base force one, they all have a ceramic bottom bracket in it, which is super awesome. And it also comes with carbon fiber bottle cages. It comes with the Arundel mandible carbon cage, comes with 2 of them in every single part kit, so you don't need to go out and buy cages after the fact, which is super sweet. Because most bikes, probably 95% of bikes in the industry, do not come with cages at all. So the fact that they're not only including them, but they're including a really nice high-end lightweight set, super cool. All those things are things I really would like to see continue into other bikes in the industry, and I think Cervélo did right. Again, my only gripe with the part kit was this tire. In my head, this tire feels like it's perfect for like really rough tarmac or super smooth gravel. I feel like it's fast there. But for a lot of the gravel we have here in Utah, it didn't feel like it was cutting it. But I think switching to something like a 45C Schwalbe G1 RS would fix almost all the issues, and that tire still rolls super fast according to most websites. Technically, tire clearance on this bike is 45 front and rear, but from some other sources, I have heard that you can fit a 50 on the front as long as there's going to be no mud. Now, I did mention earlier that this does have the all-new SRAM Force drivetrain on it, which also released the same day as this bike. Now, because this is mullet setup, I don't have a rear derailleur or front derailleur from the new Force lineup to comment on, but I can comment on the cranks and the hoods. These new Force hoods feel exactly like the red E1 hoods if you've had the chance to try those. And I'm not sure if you put both bikes side by side with red and Force and blindfolded me, I could actually tell which one was red and Force. Those hoods are super comfortable, and I really think they make or break a bike, especially on gravel bikes. The position you can hold in those hoods is so much better than previous generation SRAM hoods. I've got red E1 hoods on my current gravel bike, and they're one of my favorite changes that I have ever made, and these Force ones follow exactly in suit. Brake power is extremely consistent and way more powerful than previous bikes, and that is awesome on a gravel bike specifically. Because off-road, where you want a little bit more power, things get sketchy quick, having all the braking on tap from the new Force hoods, where you can even brake with one finger and to get all the power you need, is simply awesome, because gravel racers are spending more time in the hoods than they used to be, so the more brake power is greatly appreciated. The new cranks don't actually look or feel that different versus the old cranks. They are slightly thicker right here and then cambered on the back side. I think they look super sweet, but until SRAM actually gives us more weight specifications, I'm sure that it's more just a look difference over the previous Force cranks, because I didn't really feel a difference between my previous Force cranks. I will say with the camering on the back side, SRAM was probably going to claim they are more aerodynamic, but not sure. We'll see how that shakes out when SRAM releases this drivetrain on the same day as this bike. But overall, new Force is a great way to get into the hood shape that they brought originally with red E1 at a much lower price point. Wrapping things up here, it's pretty simple and easy to say that the Cervélo Áspero is the fastest gravel bike you could probably get your hands on in this day and age. It's extremely fast, super stable, and probably one of the most aerodynamic bikes I've ever ridden as far as off-road bikes are concerned. Not the biggest fan of the tires, but you can swap those. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. New Force is pretty awesome, and having the power of red E1 in the Force part spec is awesome and makes it a lot more available to the average consumer. If you're looking for the ultimate go fast speed machine for your local ranched roads, or you just want to swing your leg over one of these, feel free to let us know. You can email us at info@contenderbicycles.com, or you can even send us a chat on our website, or you can visit in-store in Park City or Salt Lake City. Thank you.